Welcome. I'm Sarah Owen and I lead the team at the Southwest Florida Community Foundation and Collaboratory. And I'm so grateful to be with you all today to share our annual community report. I'm most excited because I'm joining you from the new studio here at Collaboratory. We're really looking forward to using the studio because it's going to provide nonprofits and community partners access to a semi-professional recording studio in which they can create vibrant content to share with their audience. As we all know, one of the most important things that we can do for the community is give platforms for nonprofits and organizers to really share what they're doing so all of us can learn more together. Examples of what users can create here are podcasts, recorded interviews, conversations like we're having today, pre-recorded webinars, and recorded trainings, just to name a few. Information on how to book time in the studio will be coming early in 2021. You know, a virtual annual report to the community seems very on point this year. This time of year, I would normally be running into many of you at events, holiday gatherings, the local farmers markets, the beach, so many places that we were able to connect. I want you to know I really miss seeing you, but I'm pleased to know that we're finding other ways to connect. Since Collaboratory's opening 2 years ago, the foundation has been committed to the idea that Collaboratory was not just a building or a place, although we love being in here. It's also a space and a state of mind. It's a vehicle for connecting with the region, and this new studio where I sit today is part of that commitment. We never dreamed in our early planning of this space that we would be using it as a key point of connectivity now and into the future. As I take just a few minutes today to reflect on the past year, I find myself dividing 2020 into two distinct chapters, and I'm sure you're kind of doing this with your own lives. Pre-COVID 2020 and living in the time of COVID 2020. In the pre-COVID days, I, along with the foundation team, many of them in here today, socially distanced and safe, of course, to help produce this conversation. You know, we all love being in here, giving tours, connecting with nonprofits, entrepreneurs, firefighters from the station next door, fishing guides, student interns, donors, community volunteers. It's people and their lives that give this place energy and give our work energy. Sometimes when we think of an organization's annual report to the community, we think of a report out on how they did financially, gains and losses, money distributed, and those are important. But when the foundation shares our yearly reflections, we like to talk about impact and difference making, not numbers for the numbers' sake, but the stories that those numbers represent. We closed this fiscal year with $147 million in total assets, which was an increase over last year's $135 million. That's because of generous people like you and exciting programs that are happening in the community. But we also distributed over $7 million back out into the community for change-making activities. Now, $7 million sounds like a big number, and we're excited about that. But those numbers represent support of organizations, donors who have passions in the areas of food and water and the environment and the arts. So when I think of those numbers, I think of organizations like Brighter Bites and Harry Chapin Food Bank, who are working on food insecurity, the work that's happening out at Florida Gulf Coast University, Lee County Alliance for the Arts and the arts community, all kinds of organizations working with veterans like Home Base, senior services, services for animals, Paws of Lee County, people working diligently to assist and increase the possibilities for people with disabilities in our community, or SJC Boxing Club, who does a lot of development and mentoring to kids from all over the community. There's so many great stories, and you can find more of them on our website at floridacommunity.com, because the numbers only tell part of what's happening here in Southwest Florida. One of the highlights of connecting with people kind of in my pre-COVID thinking has to be our first ever On the Table last October, which now seems like a lifetime ago. But the results from that really intimate gathering of people are still impacting our work today. It was thousands of people from across our 5-county region gathered around break room tables, coffee shops, picnic tables, dining room tables, sharing what they thought was really going well in our community and how they could be more involved. It was intimate, and it was simple conversations that provided deep, deep change. Though we couldn't repeat that intimate setting of On the Table this year due to COVID concerns, we did find other ways to connect with the community. And today I'm so pleased to welcome my colleague, friend, fellow changemaker, Fay
Sarah Owen.
It's so great to have you here. I always love when we get to spend time with you. If people had kind of heard us earlier today just getting ready for this, that could have been a whole podcast on its own, I think.
I know, we're trying to figure some things out.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
So I'm glad
cool.
You're here.
Thank you.
Many of you might recognize Fay from his decades of work with the USA Today network as an award-winning photojournalist. Fay, you've taken this gift that we've all watched for such a long time of being able to use your camera to tell remarkable stories. And I got to tell you, I've really relied on that since COVID has hit our community, because you've been out there in the community. We've had some really extraordinary moments of 2020. You know, I've been watching all the news shows lately where they capture the year in photos, and this is just kind of our collaboratory time to capture the year in photos. And so you've been great about kind of curating 10 images that you think really tell the story of some of the things that have really impacted our community. But you're not just a photojournalist on the Collaboratory team. You spend a lot of time here. You're part of us. You have workspace here. You're part of our team. And before we get to those images, I'd love to just get your perspective on what's it been like to be part of this collaboratory system, or state of mind, as I like to call it, both in the pre-COVID days and living in COVID. What's collaboratory been like for you?
I think pre-COVID, I like to make a funny joke that the Collaboratory in Southwest Florida is like living in San Francisco, right? It's very modern. It's a place where, you know, once you're here, you're going to think big, and you're going to have a lot of people around you thinking big, and those people are going to help you carry out your idea. So I think the essence of what the Collaboratory means, the actual space means to me, is it's a place where I can think big, I can dream without judgment, I can find the resources I need, and you can be a dreamer and a doer, right? That whole Walt Disney thing, that it's good to dream, but you got to be able to do as well. And so that's one of the foundations that I love about the actual physical space of the Collaboratory, and that was really playing out in early 2020. I think a more abstract, maybe for me, more important thing is the sense of family that the Collaboratory actually exudes, whether it's the donors coming in, whether it's the leadership here, or whether it's the people that have shared space here, the cohorts. All of us are a family, and that early on in 2020 was taken off. I mean, it was a place where the community was coming in and being part of intimate discussions, you know. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we can lean on that and nothing gets done. But what makes the Collaboratory unique is that you get both. You get that intimate attention you need, mm-hmm. with some real world practical ways to go put it in place.
Yeah, I love hearing you talk about it. Yeah, because sometimes when you're in something all the time, for it to be reflected back to you is so important. So, you know, I know we're going to get to your images in a minute, but this living with COVID now, what was that shift like for you? Like, I remember the moment I walked back in here and realized the doors are locked. For the safety of our team and the community and everybody in here, we needed to do every safety precaution that we could, right? Just like we still are today, right? Being 6 feet apart and all that. So what's the Collaboratory experience been now in living in COVID?
I think for me, the physical space not being open out of precaution for the public safety, mm-hmm. and not being able to brainstorm with, you know, the cohorts and anyone else who walks in here, that was a miss. That was, I have to admit, that's something that I really missed. But I didn't miss it long, though, for long, because I still had the people's phone numbers, right? And you guys were still making yourselves available. And then we'll get emails from Elizabeth or Kim, you know, and we're still being held to this mission that we have, is to change, like on the fly, and try to serve the community, because in a lot of ways they look to us. We're their Apple store, right?
Right.
You go into the Apple store, you know you're going to get something progressive that's going to challenge you. So I think physically, I even expressed it to a couple of people here, I miss this. Right. But it wasn't a big enough miss for me to be paralyzed and not carry out what we are trying to do. So I still felt connected. I think we just had to make a greater effort to stay connected, and then show the community that we are still, like, you know, at the wheel.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and I think some beautiful moments came out of it. I mean, it's hard for me to describe COVID's silver lining or things like that, because I don't want to be disingenuous to the people that I know are truly suffering. But when we were considering how do we get out there and share back, I think these images that we're going to look at are going to tell such a big part of that story too, not just the community story. It's like suddenly, because we weren't all in here together and people weren't coming to us, you were out there capturing some of these really powerful moments. So let's get to those images, right?
And if I'm out there, that means the Collaboratory's out there.
Exactly.
You know
and that's what made me feel good. I remember the early images that you sent me. I was like, oh, there it is. We're still connected.
For sure, most definitely.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm anxious to get in these images and share them. And so I think the first one is an organization that Collaboratory and the Community Foundation has walked alongside for a number of years. And I think you said this one really kind of captured early 2020, right?
Right, that's David Brown and Anjali at Family Initiative.
Yeah.
A great nonprofit that is really trying to unpack the autism spectrum.
Right.
You know, they understand that people with autism just think differently. Right. But early on in 2020, they're fundraising for their brand new building. You know, at first they were in 3 small rooms, and now they're going to have a big space to go to. And early in 2020, they were really immersed in their programs. And I captured a moment of one of their teen gatherings when everyone is close and balloons are flying and there's lots of joy and lots of exuberance and hope, you know, and that's really, really the way 2020 started, you know, and they are a Collaboratory, I believe, a nonprofit that you guys help out and care for. And so they were really excited, and that image is symbolic of a lot of what the community was feeling about 2020. New resolutions made, and we're going after them.
Yeah, I think there was just so much energy around 2020,
right,
and people were just raring to go. But the next one kind of shows
life.
What happened next, right?
Exactly. Robert Atchison is this big burly nurse, you know, and he's looking over, you know, a man, an elderly man who's dying, you know, and so Lee Health said, hey, Fay, can you come in and capture some of these raw moments that are happening, in hopes of showing the community how serious this is, helping them understand it, you know. And so that's the way life is. It doesn't lead up to grief sometimes, it just happens. And so that image there kind of shows that stark shift that happens. And me being part of the Collaboratory actually gave Lee Health a little bit more comfortable. They knew that they could trust me and they can trust us with the images, and we would share them respectively. And we were the first ones in the United States to get an inside look inside an intensive care unit that had COVID patients.
Yeah, I can tell you that these images, when you first shared them with me, put everything in perspective. You know, I was watching all the media reports, and you're just seeing things. You're seeing numbers of cases, numbers of, you know, deaths, unfortunately, and just you're hearing about the toll that it's taking on the frontline workers. But that image, I think for us locally and for the whole nation, really put humanity in that moment. And I think it was that moment that I really understood what I didn't understand, you know. So
For sure, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. So the next one, I love some of these titles that you give to some of these stories. No act is too small, and this one is also COVID related, right? Because what COVID did, I think, is really shine a light on situations in our region that aren't equitable, right?
Correct.
That people that were maybe underserved or didn't have access to the things that other parts of the community did. It was like a big flashlight. So this image really portrays Immokalee farm workers, which are the lifeblood of so many industries across the nation.
Oh, this image was born out of a long conversation I had with you when I was leaving Immokalee. Sarah Owen, what can you do about COVID taking its toll in Immokalee? We had the conversation on the phone, and I'm pushing you. Use your influence. Let's get some attention out there. And so I come from a community like that. And so when COVID broke, you kind of go back to where you come from. You know, you go to what you know, you might say. And so I started capturing moments there early on and kind of sounding that alarm, saying, hey guys, these people are still packing themselves into buses for our benefit to go and pick produce for us to have. You know, we need to tell their stories. And because we were able to really push those early moments out there, the National Guard came and set up testing there in Immokalee, you know, because of those early moments that we pushed out there. And this particular moment was when the farm workers are coming back from working in the field. Several nonprofits, also, if you don't mind, with Heather Fitzenhagen, donated money and then went out there in person and made sure that these items gotten into the hands of the farm workers as they got off the bus. But that's just, that story was born out of kind of like our conversation, you might say.
Well, I think that the photo activated people. Like you mentioned Heather Fitzenhagen, you mentioned the National Guard. I know Doctors Without Borders ended up coming to Immokalee. And it's one thing to say over and over again, because before your images were released, there were a lot of conversations happening in the community. What are we going to do about this? But then the images come out and people are able to see. I think that really, really exemplifies the name of your company, Hopeful Images. Because that image may not seem hopeful, but what it inspired in other people to step up really was. Really, really powerful stuff. This next one really is impactful. This is someone that was just saying to you, I just need someone to help. And a lot of times people, seniors in our community, can become hidden. We don't see them. I remember for a number of years when I was involved with the Meals on Wheels organization, I used to say they're the hidden hungry, right? Sometimes things are right out in front. You capture it like you did the Immokalee farm workers, but sometimes things are going on that we don't know about. What about this image really struck you?
Yeah, this is Elsie. I believe she's 74 years old. And she wears a chain that says Queen, by the way, so it's kind of,
it's good.
It's got a small thing. There's some levity in the moment, but she lives in Suncoast Trailer Park. Once again, COVID hit the impoverished communities and underdeveloped communities the hardest. There are not a lot of resources in those communities pre-COVID, and then COVID hits. The scramble for the resources does not include these communities, unfortunately. And so when I was spending time in Suncoast Trailer Park documenting the plight of the elderly, I met Elsie, and in her trailer, she's not a hoarder. She's just too fragile and too weak to clean out her trailer on a regular basis. And when COVID hits, that's even tougher for her. And so capturing her story, as tough as it was to look at, and then sharing it with her permission, her understanding what's going to be shared, you know, was a huge step for that community. But once again, you know, you guys kind of giving me the freedom to go out there and help tell these stories resulted in more money coming to that local community center for more food for people like Elsie. But then also too, Lee Health kind of got a little bit more eyes on that elderly plight out there. So the elderly took it really hard during COVID, especially those that are on the on the poorer scale of our economy.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of people, generous, caring people in our community that are willing to help that just sometimes don't know what
Right.
the issues are. And that's why I think that one was so powerful. All right, now these next couple, ooh, this was another really painful moment, not for our community, but for the nation as a whole, as we face the murder of George Floyd, the hurt and the anger from hundreds of years of inequity and pain. I know that here in our communities, protests were peaceful, but yet people were able to really express their emotion. And you were right out there really capturing those moments. And I remember another conversation we had after that where I just said, tell me what you're seeing in the midst of these protests and what are you hearing? So these next two images really, I think, capture that in different ways.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes instead of me running my mouth, I could just show you the picture, right?
I know. Yeah,
No,
because the picture tells
exactly,
the story.
yeah,
I know,
exactly.
I know,
No,
exactly.
But I will say that this first image of this young woman, venting, you might say, to this police officer on Fifth Avenue South in Naples, going unchecked is really pivotal. A moment like that has never happened on Fifth Avenue South in downtown Naples, where a minority community has kind of taken over and really started to express their anger and their discontent toward, in this case, law enforcement. And so I think when you look at that moment, it's not really much for me to say. You can see that there are two parties that are absolutely, enveloped in this great uprising, you might say. And neither one know quite what to do, right? And then the second image is just totally different. That even though people were sharing their feelings maybe in a more, firm way, you might say, those same people, found a way to unite, and they were going to protest peacefully. They still were going to be there.
Right.
And because they were protesting peacefully, in this case, with the black and white hands locked together, doesn't mean they were any less resolved, if I can say it that way, or their zeal wasn't as great. They just chose maybe to be a little bit more Martin and a little bit less Malcolm, you might say, right?
Right.
And so I think both of these images show that our community in Southwest Florida was dealing with the same issues that the world was dealing with at that time. And we had this conversation, can Fay get back out there, keep telling those stories. Okay, okay, is it okay to take a break from some of the nonprofits? Yes, because we both realized, and you pointed out, that part of the Collaboratory's goal is to not only help nonprofits, but to tell stories, you know what I mean? That's just as valuable, because I think the community really turned to me, and they turned to me, they're turning to us to try to see what's going on.
Yeah, thank you for that piece. All right, now we shift to giving thanks.
For sure.
Yeah, that's a great segue, right? And there were so many great moments especially at the early part of the pandemic, where we all wanted to find ways to just pour out to frontline workers, whether it was food being delivered or trying to rally around getting PPE. But this one was just kind of this big moment of appreciation, and I just think you see it in their faces, where they appreciated being recognized and us understanding how difficult of a time, and it still is, but this was in the earlier days.
Yeah, when we had kind of made a decision that we wanted to try to give the community more stories, from the Collaboratory about what's going on. That kind of gave me the freedom to call a few folks up. So I called up, the Fort Myers Police Department and said, I don't know what you're doing, but I kind of want to just hang out with you a little bit. Is there a way I can just come and hang out with you? And organically and just authentically, I came at the right time, where they had gathered in front of Lee Memorial Hospital, and they made their cars into the shape of a heart, which you could only see from a drone, because I'm not tall enough.
Yeah.
And then, as the nurses were coming out at shift change around 6 o'clock, they were greeting them with love and lots of admiration. So here you have, a group of frontline workers honoring another group of frontline workers, and the community got a chance to see it. And those images, actually, and the Facebook Live that I did, actually spurred on this worldwide recognition of this event. And it had like 800 million web impressions that Fort Myers Police Department's, act. It kind of symbolized what a lot of police departments and a lot of people were trying to express to their frontline workers. And so it was really, really a good opportunity. And I thought the community really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and that you're talking about connectivity that isn't this face-to-face connectivity.
Right.
All of those impressions through social media, the
Right.
national exposure, that connects people. All
For
of these
sure.
images in the living with COVID times signal some type of connectivity.
And coming from an organization like the Collaboratory or maybe someone like me, there's not a lot of politics tied to it. It's just this is what is happening. We're presenting it to you, and people really feel like they can take it in without having to choose a side.
Right. They just can observe it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
really powerful. Oh, this next one just made me smile. Spacesuits,
Oh yeah.
COVID, and a mask. I love the story of what
yeah.
this little boy was thinking, right?
Exactly.
Imagine him going to the place that he regularly plays and thinking some kind of, extraterrestrial thing was going on. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, most definitely. So, we're well into COVID and testing is rolling out. And then the importance of testing in the impoverished and minority community starts to, come to boil, you might say. And so they set up a testing site in Clemente Park. And, by this time, moments had been captured at testing sites of, all kinds
the
of stuff
swab
like
up
that.
the
Yeah,
nose.
so
That's
it's
like the classic testing.
What are we going to do? What are we
Right.
going to do? But, you still go out there. You still tell the story. I think I stopped by the Collaboratory before I went out there. And then I go out there and I see this kid roll up on a pink bike and he doesn't have a mask. And a nurse offers him a mask and he's like, really? You really want me to put this mask on? And then I stop and I talk to him and, begrudgingly he kind of puts it on and then he thinks it's kind of cool, But this moment, I think in some small ways, crystallizes, the decision, do I wear a mask? Should I wear a mask? I don't understand the importance of wearing a mask yet. And then that education process taking in place. Here's why you should. We can't make you do it, but, just think about it. And I think that image really does that in a lighter way. It's not saying wear a mask or I'm not wearing a mask. It was like, it's your choice. And sometimes, what's that honey thing? You can get more bees with honey. And I think that's what that image got right there for sure.
Yeah,
it's fun.
That is.
I
I did too. I love that one. All right, this next image takes us to Hendry County because, the Collaboratory does serve 5 counties. And I know a couple of these have been from Collier. And this one is a particularly painful image, but Hendry County really rallied around the pain of one of their neighbors, and the story was just heartbreaking. But that community is so close-knit and so caring. If you spend any time out there, you just see how connected that they are to each other. So talk a little bit about this one.
Florida and Fish and Wildlife Officer Julian King. I think I have a great smile. According to everyone in LaBelle, there was no smile brighter from a more caring person than this, officer. And unfortunately, he was shot and killed as he was trying to carry out his duty, and that was really unfortunate. And that came at a time when the police were catching some flack, for some of the actions that they had been doing. And people were trying to figure out, police, not police, police, not police. But when Julian passed away, it stripped away all of that and reminded us that, yes, police officers are human as well, and that they are risking their life, and that a lot of them do care. Maybe the majority of them do care really deeply. And so that community really, in a very big way, modeled, what we possibly should be doing when it comes to this interacting, looking at the person and who they were. And I like to say, if you're going to pass away, you would be fortunate to pass away in LaBelle, because that community they will look at your flaws, but they're going to look at who you were the most, and they're going to honor that. And that death brought races together, it brought families together, and it just brought a lot of people together. And that particular moment probably was the most on my Facebook page. I think it's still maybe near the 400,000 views, because not because it's such a great moment that I captured, but people could relate to it.
Yeah.
And and so I thought that was very important, and we might have even had a conversation about that on
I'm
the
sure
way
we
back.
did.
So,
Each
yeah,
of your images sparked something in me. Well, I could sit here all day and do this because I know you have hundreds of images, but why don't you share this last one with us?
Yeah, this last one is probably, I don't know, it means the most to me as a person. I try not to do this best thing at all, because that's relative. But it's an image of Tessa Lesage, of Future Makers, and she is comforting an attendee to her implicit bias and structural racism seminar that she was putting on, I believe, with Nicole King.
Yeah.
And what's so special about it to me is she's not trying to tell the woman how to grieve. She's not saying it's going to be all right. Her hand on her back and her being in a humble position just says, I'm here, right? I'm here. And I thought that the Collaboratory, and I said this to you and I said it to Tessa and Elizabeth and a lot of other people, having the courage to say, okay, we're going to open up the Collaboratory. We're going to follow every single CDC guideline that we need to follow, but we need to have this conversation now. And so to have that in-person conversation where the community can come in the midst of the upheaval, in the midst of the reckoning. When I wrote about it, I said we all went down into America's basement and we turned on the lights and we didn't like what we saw, but we weren't going to run away from it. So these people from our community came to the Collaboratory, shared their stories about racism, about encountering racism, about maybe their unconscious contributions to racism. They weren't made to feel bad. They weren't beat over the head. They walked out with an understanding. And when I see that moment of that hand on that back, that's what I'm going to remember most probably of 2020, is the effort to connect. You see? And whether that's virtual or whether that's in person, whether it's a text, whether it's 3 times I'm calling Sarah and finally on the 4th time she answers, I don't want any advice. I just want to connect.
Right.
And I think that's what that image says to me. And I'm biased. I'm glad it happened in a Collaboratory, because I'm all about us finding a way to be a good medium for people to find out about stories.
Yeah, sometimes it's just about holding space.
Exactly.
Physically.
For sure.
And emotionally.
Most definitely.
Wow. Well, Kim Fay, thank you so much.
Thank
it's just
you.
been so great to be with
I
you
know.
today. I appreciate it. And now, we are using this time to kind of look back and reflect on 2020,
Sure.
but we're also looking ahead. So what we know is there'll be new images in the new year.
For sure.
And we'll talk about those, because that's what we do.
Most definitely. And then I'll call you when I'm coming back.
Sounds good. All right, my friend. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Oh, those are powerful images, truly hopeful images. And a number of them reminded me of those painful early days of the pandemic, what I described earlier as living in COVID and 2020. And the foundation at that time just had such a great desire to do all that we could to ease suffering. That began really, I'd say, mid-March, when we really saw that our community, along with the nation, was going to be greatly impacted. And we established the Southwest Florida COVID Relief Fund in partnership with our great friends at the United Way of Lee, Henry, Glades, and Okeechobee. The minute we realized that Southwest Florida neighbors were going to be suffering due to health, economic, and mental health concerns, we knew we had to do all we could to garner resources. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and got money into the hands of nonprofits that were serving right on the front lines for those early basic needs. Along with disaster relief, we try to provide platforms for nonprofits to share info on virtual fundraising, connect with them on stimulus package opportunities, and just being there to listen and learn. We wanted to continue the work that we do all the time here in the community. We hosted virtual events for scholarship for some of our specialty funds. We supported cohorts of entrepreneurs. We had a champions meeting for the Future Makers Coalition, and we found ways to constantly and stay in touch with our partners and friends. It's always interesting to look back, but if we've learned anything from 2020, it's that things can change quickly, and we must always be looking ahead with hope. And we have some big news on the horizon in 2021, and I think we're all looking forward to something to look ahead. COVID has taught us many lessons, including that there is both great need and a will for real solution to community issues. In the coming year, the Southwest Florida Community Foundation will unveil the most daring initiative in its history, or in the history of any community foundation in America, to bring people, businesses, funders, and nonprofit organizations together to solve community problems in an integrated way on a daring timeline. The initiative will be announced in the spring of 2021. What I can say about it now is that it will be to community problem solving what the Apollo missions were to the moon: visionary, daring, innovative, and imaginary in every way. And we'll be involving everyone, every one of you, everyone in the community in its achievement. It simply is unlike anything that has ever been proposed or undertaken in Southwest Florida before. So with that, I just offer my thanks and gratitude to each of you for your role in what we've accomplished in 2020. And I invite you to join us as we move on together. Here we go.